Hopefully we'll have a few more. We also have a couple of guests on the line who will help respond to questions. Craig Kessler, Kevin Fitzgerald from the SCGA Government Relations, and then Tony Rice is joining, who will be, Tony is our lobbyist in Sacramento and is of course filled with information. We'd like to remind you that this is being recorded for later use. And so we will monitor in that regard and ask you to consider that it is being recorded. Also, please take a look at our two websites, scpga.com for our archives and for our coronavirus 19, COVID-19, excuse me.
COVID, you're close.
Yeah, COVID, sorry. I knew I'd get it right at some point with help. Take a look at that. We have, we're updating both websites, SCPJ Junior Tour as well, almost on an hourly basis with updated information. Of course, there's a number of other websites that are available, which we also have posted on our two websites. So I encourage you to keep up and in touch in that regard. Of course, you certainly can call anytime. If you go to the website, our direct lines are listed underneath our photograph, and please feel free to use that. My mobile phone, if you want to text or call, and I'll just give it to you all right now, is 858-775-7421. Feel free to call me anytime. I fall asleep about 7:30 usually at night, but I am usually up at 4:30 or 5 a.m. So you can get a hold of me. But hopefully we'll shed a little bit of light on what's going on out there in the state and in the county, all the counties, excuse me, of Southern California. And I know there's been some conflicting messages from the governor as well as the mayor of Los Angeles, in my opinion, conflicting messages. And it's hard to determine at some point, at some time, what we do. But hopefully through this call and with the help of Craig and Kevin and Tony, we'll be able to answer some of your questions. There is a chat piece to this if you'd like to use it, but you also are encouraged to verbalize your questions on audio. And we would ask that throughout this, if you have a mute function on your telephone, please use that until you have a question. Or if you're on the video chat, there is a mute button at the bottom of the screen that you can use as well. So with that, I'd like to introduce Tony Latendre, our president, for a couple of opening words.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for spending the time with us. You know, I don't want to get into a lot of the conversation just yet until we have an opportunity to talk to Craig and Tony and see what the latest is in Sacramento. But I'm hoping that this conversation will stimulate some ideas and stimulate just an openness and a conversation between all of us, because at the end of the day, we're all in this together, and we want to make sure that everybody has a resource and somebody to bounce ideas off of, somebody to talk to. There's a lot of moving parts to this, and again, it's ever changing. I was shocked, you know, to be on the road pretty much yesterday, the whole day, and come home at 7 o'clock to my director of golf texting me saying, what are we doing tomorrow? And totally dumbfounded, had no idea that the news had hit about the statewide shutdown. So, you know, before we get into any like best practice or maybe sharing some ideas of what people are doing at their clubs, I'd love to hear maybe the latest from Craig or Tony. I assume you're on the line by now, and you know, give us a little bit of guidance and let us know what's going on.
Tony, would you like to take us out, or would you like me to take us out? That was Tony Rice. I know there's a lot of Tonys on the call.
Sounds like it's you, Craig.
Okay. as much as everybody on this call, and I'm just by telephone.
Hey, Craig, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry, everybody. They tell you have to star, and I got the wrong number. So, well, good morning, everybody. I'll just try to be brief. I know we're all trying to muddle through this as well. For those of you who do not know me on the call, because I believe this is going to be a pretty full call, my name is Tony Rice. I'm a lobbyist, governmental consultant here in Sacramento. I've been working with Craig and Tom and others at the California Alliance for Golf for several years now. And just like probably the rest of you, we're all trying to make sense as to the new universe that we're all living in. So in my desire to be brief, I do need to give a little bit of context of just kind of over the past week of how we're here and then how that will interplay with what you all are trying to do. And hopefully I'll probably provide more questions than answers, but hopefully at some point in time, I'll get to the right spot at the right time. So obviously I don't have to share with you that the universe has changed. Virtually almost every day throughout the state, localities, cities, counties have been stepping up their directives to people. Either it started in the Bay Area with 6 counties, almost 7 million people to shelter in place. And then other counties started coming up saying, we don't recommend sheltering in place because that has an emergency connotation, but to stay at home. But literally within 24 hours, 48 hours, everybody got to a place at some point of the shelter in place rule. And for folks who are not from Sacramento County did that yesterday at a press conference in the morning with some of the local elected officials from the county and the city, but they also had the district attorney as well as the county sheriff at that very same press conference to impress upon the participants and all of us that this now carries a legal order as opposed to a recommendation to stay in place. It is now, they don't want to arrest anybody. They made that abundantly clear, but at the same point in time, they have legal authority to do that if in fact people can continue to be bad actors in their mind. Of course, the citation that we're all here is what does that mean for industry? Later in the day, LA County had an impromptu press conference that came together within a few hours to do the same thing. And then throwing everything even more muddy, it was the dinner last night doing the exact same thing with far less stipulations than even some of the localities have been rendering. So now we have this interplay of what's essential, what's not. I would also say that Sacramento County yesterday, and other counties as well around the state, have said that, look, getting outside is good for people's mental health. Please just practice social distancing. But we encourage people to use our system. It was either national state parks yesterday or perhaps both. Are waiving fees at this point in time for insurance so that people can utilize those services and get out and do something other than just being shuttered in-house. So I will also say that during our CAG call this morning, I had a call from an old lobbyist friend of mine who didn't even know he was still alive, and since we spoke, he called me because he knew that I represented CAG. He had neighbors questioning whether they can still go and play golf, and I will tell you what I told him, that right now the best advice is to work through whatever municipality has jurisdiction over your courses or the courses you consider playing at, what these county public health officials. As well, if you're in unincorporated areas, maybe they don't know. I think you will get a lot of I don't know. And one of the reasons I brought up about that he has a client that provides food, meals to prisoners. Oh, yes, the governor's office, there was a task force, 5 groups around the state trying to determine what's essential and non-essential. They took 48 hours to figure out if it was an essential service for a delivery person to drop off meals to inmates, and they were flabbergasted that they even had to consider this. So I use that as an example of there are not going to be easy answers going forward. but it does seem to be, and Craig can add more illumination on this, as he always does. His insight is as great as anybody on this, and he's getting on local as anybody else. But right now, from a level perspective, it does not seem to be there are specific limitations to what we are trying to do. In fact, you could make the argument, and I think a reasonable one, and not a big stretch, that it actually complies with the directives by some elected officials to get out, exercise, just practice social distancing. I think we can accomplish that in our industry, and yet there is no specific decree or mandate that says golf is exempt from what we're trying to do. So I don't have anything beyond that. I think it will continue to evolve as most of these bills go through industry by industry. But I'm sorry to talk about it. I think that's what you said right now, Craig or anybody else. Just feel free to add on.
Okay, I will add on. So to give everyone on this call a little bit of a real flavor of what Tony just conveyed. As I listened, along with many of you, I suppose, yesterday, to various press conferences that were established to announce new and much stricter directives, and listened to the County of Los Angeles, the City of Los Angeles, and later, an hour or two later, the governor, I concluded that, well, golf would pretty much be shuttered. And as I read the City of Los Angeles directive, which is the strictest of the three I just mentioned, stricter than the County of Orange, and even stricter on paper than the one in Sacramento County, I was at least pleased to see that there was provision made in the details for protecting, or in other words, defending a golf course during closure, and doing the maintenance necessary to keep it from falling apart, so that at least if we were going to go into down in the golf industry, the golf courses wouldn't be completely destroyed, whether it's 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, we don't know how long that's going to be. However, as things began to unfold, I was getting emails and calls from the very governments that had just issued these proclamations that they were interpreting their own language, which struck me as pretty draconian, as permitting them to open the golf courses that they own. And so for example, today, the City of Los Angeles' municipal courses are open. The County of Los Angeles made a decision last night that they too could open. Some are open today, many are not. That's because their lead concessionaire, the American Golf Corporation, at roughly somewhere around 10 o'clock last night, simply made a decision to shut everything down. I think in their entire portfolio. And I'm going to guess that decision had less to do with the legal authority to open, as Tony just suggested. There's a lot of room. Clearly, these governments themselves think there's sufficient room within the language that they've promulgated to open the facilities that they own, and that's a pretty good indicator that you won't be fined or arrested if you're in those jurisdictions. Same goes for the County of Orange. However, there's a lot more that goes into a decision as to whether to open or not open. It strikes me that some are taking a wait-and-see attitude. Others are plowing forward. There are municipal golf courses in the city and county of Sacramento that are open today, despite the sheriff having stood outside. And I'm going to guess that particularly the city of Sacramento's concessionaire is very politically connected and is a very smart fellow, and probably received the okay from the city that, you're at least we won't fine or arrest you or shut you down if you do this. How long that holds or maintains is anybody's guess. This is a situation that's extraordinarily fluid. So as much as everyone is probably looking for definitive answers, much like our AB5 debate, which seems like it's a lifetime to go, it'll come back, there are none. I had an exchange with a pretty prominent lawyer from a private club who's being asked to, actually advise that club, and we're trading, dicta back and forth that sort of explain the situation, whether it's William Goldman's, famous dictum about Hollywood, nobody knows anything, or hard cases make bad law, or crises make for really atrocious public policy. All those sorts of things maintain. And of course, the situation changes moment by moment as we see more deaths in Italy, more deaths in the United States. We hear a lot of things that are scary. We ultimately, sometime in the future, will know how many of those scary things came to fruition and how many were just, worst case scenarios that didn't happen. So we're flying a little bit blind, and I think, as Tony suggested, and I would concur with him, that the best indicator, at least from the legal point of view, and like I said, there are other things to consider here in decisions to open or close or how to open or close, is to look at because virtually all of these large governmental entities issuing these proclamations. By the way, just as an aside, if you look at the directives from various cities and counties, they're quite thick and complicated. They're painful to read, and I have to read them, so I have to go through the pain. And which sounds appropriate. You're trying to govern human behavior in a crisis, in a health crisis, and you're trying to give some direction. The governor's proclamation, which stimulated headlines across the country, like the one in the Wall Street Journal, California governor locks down the state. Maybe that's what he was looking for. But when you read it, it's totally meaningless. It speaks in terms of a stay-at-home and then says, but of course, if you're part of the 16 services identified by the federal government as essential, click here to find what they are, then you don't really come under this particular admonition. And then when you look at it, it's everything under the sun, including gaming. So it's almost a nullity, but that didn't entirely surprise me, because as I listened to the governor yesterday, it struck me that he seemed to be contradicting the stance that he took, which was that the state would set minimum standards and then encourage all the local governments to figure out that they couldn't go drop below those basic standards, but they not only could but should consider going well above them to the degree to which their particular circumstances merited, and they knew better. There was no one-size-fits-all for the state. I was particularly encouraged because we've often heard the opposite in Sacramento, and particularly longer range, this crisis will pass, but the water issues will not pass. And what he had enunciated in the way he was approaching COVID-19 was, in essence, music to the golf industry's ears, because we've been preaching for a long time that Sacramento doesn't have a clue as to what goes on in San Diego or Riverside counties, and really ought to do the same thing. But then when I if you read his order, I realized he really didn't shift his stance at all with what he did yesterday. And if we knew him personally, he would probably say, I wanted to scare the hell out of everyone and make everyone understand this was serious, so that they would at least take their local orders seriously, and at least they would sense they could that they should probably stay at home, and that this was a serious matter. The misinformation and the misunderstanding that surrounds this entire discussion is understandable, because in essence, when you have the mayor of Los Angeles stand up and literally say, almost at the opening of his remarks, that any business, that except for a handful of things that go to the very nature of our ability to survive as a society, food service, pharmacies, doctors, police, fire, no business can require an employee to do anything but work at home. In other words, you can't go to a site. But I thought, well, how does a golf course open if you can't manage or maintain it, at least a daily fee course, if you can't collect the money? So we're shut down. That was literally. But then today he's out on television saying you should get out and recreate. And, of course, the golf courses that his city owns are open for business today. So it's a confusing morass, and you may wonder why Tom invited Tony and Craig and others on the phone call to confuse you even further. But if you take nothing more from this than that they're just the best that, and what I've tried to do with the SCGA is put out some of these reports. Many of you get those things that have tried to bring everyone all the best and most accurate information that they can use as golf professionals, GMs, or facilities to make their best informed judgments based upon all the factors that they consider important. So I don't think there's anything, no one can tell you what to do. They can just bring you all the information necessary for you to make those informed choices moving forward. So with that, dollop of great overwhelming confidence in my own conclusions, and I'm being very facetious, I would just sort of yield the floor back to whether it's Tom, Nikki, who is ever running this, and we can move on from there. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, Craig, thank you. And we'd like to have an exchange as to what everybody's doing. If anybody has any questions, did have one question in regards to what relief small businesses, if you or Tony or Kevin Fitzgerald would be able to answer that, what relief for small businesses? We know about the SBA provisions, Small Business Administration, for loans and loan repayment. But is there anything else that everyone needs to know regarding small business relief?
My answer to that would be all of that is a work in progress, and that both the United States Congress and the California, I believe, legislature, or mostly the Congress, is going to be, there's only enough money in the federal till to really cover what's going on, that are working on it as we're here. We expect more relief. I think everyone, I'm sure, is aware that the deadline for filing taxes and making payments due for 2019 have been extended to July 15th. Good news to me personally, and so I think you're going to see a bevy of things come out. Plus, we're going to hear the details of a direct, an infusion of liquidity into the system with direct payments to persons. There are various iterations of it, anywhere from $1,000 a person to $1,200 to $2,000. That's on the personal level, not the business level. But other than the SBA program, and I know a lot of facilities have already made application, I'm not aware of anything, and I don't know if Tony's aware of anything either.
Yeah, this is Tony. A couple of things on that. So the SBA has accelerated an offering and promised to expedite processing of the SBA loans. For those of you in and around the Sacramento region, the Sacramento Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce just a few days ago actually did a very public campaign to highlight that these are out there. Loans can be issued up to $2 million per applicant. The Sac Metro Chamber CEO had said they had a member entity who was able to get through within 6 minutes. But they strongly encourage, and I would strongly encourage anybody on this call, that if you need an SBA bridge loan or would like to qualify, I will echo what they said, is that get it in early, because they obviously expect a crush of applications. So if you or anybody that you know is going to be utilizing those resources, the advice is to start that process immediately, because they will soon get swamped. On a state level, we are shut down. And when I say shut down, I mean the legislature on Monday took an extended spring break, but it's in essence a shutdown. The Capitol is even locked down to members of the public. I can't walk in and do my normal course of business. And so government will still function, but it's kind of on a hiatus for the most part. But when we come back in May, and here in California, we have what's called the May Revise. What that is the most up-to-date information on taxes and expenditures. Obviously, our budget is going to take a huge hit. We don't know how much that will be, but but the expectation is that the state will continue to do what it can to support businesses and individuals. Craig correctly mentioned there is Senate Republicans are leading an effort to provide direct payments to individuals. My understanding of that bill to date, and it should be unveiled in kind of finalized in the next few days. I think is their expectation is that there's not going to be anything additional beyond the SBAs at this point in time, but they're already anticipating another round. So depending on how businesses go, but when we come back in California to consider our budgets, I think there is a possibility of direct kind of loans or whatever it may be for businesses. Speculation at this point in time, but here in Sacramento, again, I keep using them as an example. When they put down their lockdown order a few days ago, not yesterday's stay-at-home, more legal one, but when they urged people to stay home, they created $1 million pot of funds for businesses. Obviously, that's going to be eaten up, very quickly if it's not already gone. But yeah, I use that as an example that public officials are already looking at the need to support local businesses.
Thank you, Craig and Tony. Any other questions that someone might have, and we'll try to keep this as orderly as possible.
I have a question. It's Sean Cox. Could you guys comment on the difference between a private club or a resort or a public facility? Is there any thoughts on that?
Tony, I'll take that one because I actually think in terms of that universe, and you probably don't. No, the laws and the regulations are identical for everything, whether it's publicly or privately held. However, there are differences. So the key difference is really the economic sustainability factor for both. So private clubs, at least those that are in relatively good condition, some are struggling right now. Staffs, the maintenance, everything can be sustained by member dues. At a daily fee facility, unless money is coming in over the till, there's nothing that sustains the operation, and thus the opening question from Tom about direct relief through loans, grants, and other things. So there's a practical difference, but not a legal difference. They both must hew to the same laws and regulations and directives. The other practical difference is that, so for example, and I just received another email from the city of Los Angeles about what precautions they're taking while their courses are open today. So an equity private club, or even has maximal control over those things and can demonstrate it. A little tougher when you're a public park to maintain the kinds of separation and differences, in particular the separation between staff and public. Resorts are sort of in between. They're not as tightly contained as a private club, which is open to members only. But they also don't operate under the burdens of a municipal golf course, which again, those are parks in California law, and they run into a whole host of problems in terms of you can't discriminate, you can't turn anybody away, and a resort tends to be much pricier. It has a slightly different take in clientele, and I think there's a greater expectation even by the patrons that the operators of the facility are not running a park, but running something that are much more in the hospitality business. And implicit in that, everyone has an understanding that there will be greater controls. So that's the answer again, and it's another issue that I think suffuses all of these discussions. Directives are directives are directives, and law is law is law, and it applies equally to everything. But in their application, the result they're not actually equal, because the challenges are different, the expectations are different, and the ability to do X, Y, or Z are very, very different depending upon the status of the facility. And with that long answer, I hope I answered your question, but I may not have, but I'll let you be the judge of that.
Sean, was that good?
That was good. And the one thing with a resort, we do have a hotel, so we fall into that category where we can keep the hotel open. So that's kind of a wild card with resorts. So thank you.
Tom's son, if you're on the line, would you
Yeah.
please?
Hi, Tom. This is Tom.
Go ahead.
Yes, I chatted earlier, but just wanted to share because of this situation was very challenging. Given our relationship with the Chamber of Commerce, with the Mayor of Oceanside, I was able to reach out to them this morning, and they've given us very definitive feedback in terms of our status, whether to stay open or close. Because of what happened yesterday with the order, we did decide ourselves to close for today. So deciding in terms of future, whether going forward, how long will we close or stay or even reopen. So we asked the guidance of the mayor and Chamber of Commerce, and both of them came back saying that as of now, we should operate, and that those guidance from the mayor and the Chamber of Commerce have been very helpful in terms of guiding us in the right decision to make for a facility here at Arrowwood. So I would, if you have the relationships, reach out to the Chamber of Commerce or the city itself to get more guidance as to what they're thinking in terms of whether staying open or close.
Tom, thanks. Anybody else have any comments in that regard? Who maybe some of you who have reached out to your local municipality? Anything else? Okay, any other questions? As we move forward, I have another 20 some minutes or so before we're done. We're having another call on Monday, I'd like to remind you as well, because I'm sure that things will change and be updated. So we'll have more to talk about on Monday. So I encourage you to participate Monday as well. Questions, comments?
Wow,
Hey,
this is a quiet group. I was hoping to hear some good comments about what's going on the actual battlefront where this is going on, instead of up in the penthouse where we work, Tom. So I'd love to hear.
Well, I'll chime in if everybody can hear me. So it's interesting you say that, Craig, about what's happening in Sacramento versus what's happening on the battlefront. First, I want to thank you guys for everything and that you're doing on behalf of all of us, Tony and Craig. For those of you that don't know on this call, these two fight, and Kevin, I apologize, Kevin, you're on the line, I think, too. Fight tirelessly for us in Sacramento in various regards for the betterment of the golf business and the operation, the day-to-day operation of the golf business, letting us do what we need to do and making sure that some of these laws that get kind of passed without thinking of all sectors of business that kind of blanket us and lump us into things, fighting tirelessly for us. So thank you very much for what you guys are doing. I'll tell you that here at Dove, we're in a unique situation. I think the point of what I'm going to say here in sharing what we're doing is really to let you know that at the end of the day, you need to do what's best for your business. As Craig and Tony said, you can't force employees to come to work. I've certainly got employees here that are uncomfortable coming to work. They are, for fear of whatever it is, whether it be spreading or contracting COVID-19, but you can't make people come to work, and that's fine. But I also think if there are people that want to come to work, I think it's okay, as we're learning that maybe golf courses can be open, as seen by the County of Los Angeles, the County of San Diego, that the golf courses are open. It is a sanity check for people. Our situation at Dove Canyon is a little bit unique in the fact that within the community, we have 1,300 homes. And our point of view is that if we sorry about that. I didn't muted me. I hope you can hear me again. At Dove Canyon, we have 1,300 homes within our community, and we, not all of them are members. And we believe that if there's a place for people to find sanctuary and be able to get to-go food, not have to leave the walls of the community, not have to leave the gates, go into town, whatever, because we are a little bit removed from civilization, so to speak. You know, we think that there's an opportunity for that to provide that service, and which is good because it'll help people work and help people stay active and things like that. Again, this is just we have not made the formal decision to do so. We will be talking about it. A lot of it will be determined by what I've heard on this call this morning when I talked to our senior leadership, because we do have 5 clubs within our company. But at the end of the day, I think everybody has to look at their own operation individually, what's best for their operation, what's best for their membership, their constituents, whether it's guest play, member play, whatever, and make that decision. But again, you have to keep in mind people's comfort levels. Like I said, I've got employees here that are not comfortable coming to work, and I'm not going to force them to work. But if there are people who are willing to come and work for their own well-being or for their own get out of the house, whatever that factor may be, I'm hoping that we're going to decide to let them to be able to run our restaurant and maybe run our golf course at this point, provided we can provide the social distancing guidelines and do some things on the golf course like removing rakes and removing flag stickers, that sort of thing, all those touch points. So I can share with you that's what we're thinking about. We have not made a clear decision, and thank you for Tony and Craig for giving us a little bit more information about what other counties and some of the clearness of the laws that are written and the way they're written. It's going to be helpful for us to make an informed decision. To be honest, I want my members to have a place to go and be not confined to their homes. Let them be out and not get kind of the sanity check, I call it. So we'll see what happens, but hopefully that'll stimulate a little bit of conversation. I'd like to hear any comments, any questions, and that's what we're looking at here at the club. Again, we're a private club. We are not an equity club. We are individually owned by a corporation, but we are private.
Thank you, Tony. Are there any of you out there, and appreciate what Tony said about especially being in a gated community and taking care of the citizens within that gated community, which is really important. Is there anyone out there who has a comment regarding staying open for cash flow and maintaining employment for your employees and anybody else, I should say, maintaining employment for your employees, what you're doing in that regard? And then Holly Kennedy has something to follow up with as well.
Hi guys, this is Holly here. I listened to what Tom said, and I'm feeling very fortunate being in Oceanside that we have apparently been given the okay to be open. The one thing that I'm just going to comment on is that I do want to somehow get that in writing from the city. I'm concerned about people in the community questioning us for being open, and I just want to, be able to say to them, this permission has been given to us in writing. So that's something that I'm going to pursue. And Tom, Son, you and I can talk about that maybe after this call. The other thing too is that in North County, we've got all these different cities. So we've got Carlsbad, San Marcos. I know Frank Inuzzi at San Marcos, at St. Mark Golf Club. He was he was on the chat and saying that he's not clear whether he can be open or not. So I don't know if there's any recommendations on the best way to get this permission or clarification on this permission from our different chambers and our different mayors, but any input there would be very helpful.
Yeah, Holly, this is Frank from St. Mark, and we are in a weird position because we're even unincorporated, so it muddles the waters even more for us. So we're just like sitting ducks here, and we need cash, and it's just really difficult to go on day by day not knowing anything. And some days we open, some days we don't. So it's just we're lost, and we've got a lot of employees, and we're trying to do the best we can for them, but we're also a business, and I mean, shortly here, if we don't figure this out, there could be, drastic changes and measures we have to make here shortly. So it's really difficult.
Yeah, I hear you. So if there's anyone, in the higher ranks that are on this call that, have recommendations for us at our levels as owners and managers on basically where to get permission or how to get clarification on that, that would be extremely helpful for us.
Tony or Craig? Anything there?
Tom, if I can piggyback, well, before they chime in, I've got kind of a secondary question that goes along with that. In the end, how enforceable, is this? If you decide to be open because you make the judgment that, we're an outdoor space and we've taken all these precautions, what's going to happen? Are they going to slap a serious fine on you? They're going to slap you on the wrist and say close? What could happen is, I guess, would be a piggyback to that.
Yeah. Craig, do you want to take a stab at that, or you want me to give it a shot? Well, maybe Craig had to jump off. Can everybody still hear me? Am I unmuted or?
No, you're good.
Can hear you.
Okay. Holly, I apologize. I think that was Holly. I missed part of your question. I did get the gentleman's question, the follow-up, so feel free to jump in if I don't answer your question directly. But in regards to what will be done, I keep going back to there is still, I don't want to say a bifurcation. There is a stratification from locality to the state as to what any authority means. So we keep going back to Craig and I keep saying, your local jurisdictions are going to be probably the first place to start because there is not a comprehensive idea yet on what to do. I will say, and why I chose to jump in on this is that I'll give the example of Sacramento again, and the governor issued this last night as well. So these are from the statewide directive as well as here in my local county. They being the folks who are issuing these orders have continued to reiterate that they do have no intention or desire to arrest or cite, that for the purposes of Sacramento, where you have the sheriffs and police chiefs and what have you who would be in charge of enforcement, they have repeatedly said that we want to educate. If there are actors out there who we do not believe are doing what needs to be done at this point in time, we will tell you that. We will ask you to change your course. And the governor last night issued the same type of directive, even though he says, he has said a couple different times he has the ability to activate the National Guard, which would essentially be his local police force or law enforcement agency. But of course, he could certainly, ask the sheriffs and or local police chiefs on his behalf or CHP to impede as well. But again, they have no desire to do that. And I think it's for two reasons. One of which is, look, there are going to be people who are just trying to make ends meet or whatever it is that, they're trying to do the best that they can and government is going to give them the benefit of the doubt. And then I also think it's from a public perception panic issue is that if you can't have SWAT teams on the corner enforcing every little thing right now because you want to keep people as calm as possible. So for those two reasons, I don't see citations you're being shut down, anyone being hauled off in the back of a cruiser anytime soon. But of course, that still doesn't answer the question of can we be open either. But at this point in time, there is no desire to enforce through law enforcement means or prosecution means any non-compliance in the eyes of anybody right now.
So Holly, this is Tom's son. To opine on your question, in my opinion, I think it's going to be difficult for a city on paper to say that we could operate our golf course. I spoke to the mayor this morning, and he verbally told me that other golf courses in Oceanside are operating, so that's comforting. And number two, the Chamber of Commerce came back in written email stating, there are reasons for why we should be able to operate. So I think that's basically what we can get from our city and from the Chamber of Commerce at this time, given the situation is so fluid. So that's my opinion. And then lastly, for the owners and for the managers of, especially Frank, and who's in a similar situation as we are, we're a public golf course, and obviously we rely on daily revenues. We don't have the membership dues to apply for the SBA loan ASAP. We just submitted the application yesterday. I don't know what the answer is going to be, but I spoke to the Chamber of Commerce yesterday, and as was pointed out by others, that SBA is really focused on this, and they will reply to you within days of your application, whether yay or nay, and within weeks they'll be able to provide the funding, according to the Chamber of Commerce, who was on a conference call with SBA federally 2 days ago, as she told me. So I would advise for those, especially for public courses relying on daily revenues, to apply for the SBA loan ASAP. I think that's critical.
Thank you, Tom. That's really, really good information, and that is available. One more question, or at least a question came through, and Tony, appreciate the comments on the no enforcement kind of a thing. That may not eliminate any liability that come in. What are the liability issues that you can see, if any, and you can say there's no comment, either you or Craig, of course, but what liability issues do you see if a golf facility, whether it's a range or a golf course, decides to stay open? Anything in that regard?
Yeah, so I think at this point in time, the worst case scenario is I've been kind of trying to sift through these orders and then listening to the elected officials and kind of encapsulating all of my comments up to this point in time. Here's how I see it playing out if, in fact, your locality would frown upon you being open. So you make the best determination that you can based on the really non-prescriptive orders, and you think that based on the totality of information that you are doing what you think is legally compliant based on everything that you know to be true. So you operate, someone complains, or your local jurisdiction doesn't think that you should be operating based on their interpretation. And so they bring out either the sheriff or the police to say, hey, this is not an advisable essential business at this point in time. We're going to need you to stop. And if that happens, I would imagine that if they are on site, you will have to shut down at that point in time because, in their opinion, you shouldn't be operating, and therefore they are going to want you to comply with their interpretation. But herein lies the problem. There is no prescriptive one way or the other as of yet as it relates to what you're operating. And based on the information that officials have been talking about, I don't want to say it's going to be on a case-by-case basis, but they are going to have to work through what's essential and what's not as well. So, and then if, in fact, they shut you down or they say you need to stop, then you would need to stop, and then you would need to have some amount of redress, which would be contacting your local officials, whether it be city council, public health, your county board of supervisors, to get further clarification. I do not see a blanket authority that we are all going to be able to wake up to on Monday morning and say, okay, golf is permissible and golf is not. I think that the state will not do that, in my humble opinion. They could, but as Craig has mentioned, their order was very loose. And I think that was done on purpose to allow maximum flexibility, as well as not to step on the counties and the cities that have imposed their own orders in place. They want to allow the locals to continue to go above what the governor will do. So in terms of, at least again for Sacramento County, they said they don't want to prosecute. So even if they shut you down, they're not going to have a door throw you in the back of a cruiser. But that's Sacramento County. We just don't know what, Placer County, what, Second County and in California, what they need to do. So we will continue to, we do not have definitive answers. I don't expect anything definitive in the near future, but this is something that's going to be after the grow. But there's only so much bandwidth in these agencies and departments right now. They are probably not going to be focused on whether or not golf is going to go, but less certain Air Force on it.
Tony, the last minute or so there was very garbly.
Yeah, Tom, I accidentally muted myself. So I have a key question here for Tom, Son, and Holly. So I know once upon a time the city of Oceanside owned a municipal golf course. It may have closed. Does the city of Oceanside own a golf course?
Yes, they do.
Yeah,
okay.
They're open today, Craig.
Okay, there you have. If you're looking, there are no black and white answers, and even an attorney general's opinion is not dispositive in a California court. It's a piece of evidence, but it doesn't decide the case for you. But this is the most powerful evidence that if the jurisdiction that you're worried about is the enforcement agency, as interpreting the law under which all are operating as allowing the golf course to remain open, you can rest assured that that jurisdiction will not fine you or otherwise come down. As Tony just said, the state has assumed no enforcement powers for itself yet. Ultimately, if things really go off the rails, the governor can declare martial law. He has a lot of tools in his toolbox. He's not used many of them at all at this particular point. So again, I'll repeat something I said, and I know everyone looks for black and white answers, but what you're really looking at, and in terms that you're asking about the criminal side, and even on the civil side, it's all a matter of evidence, and of course, all very, very the state directive applies to everyone. Then there are a number of local directives, many of which are much stronger than anything that's gone on in San Diego County, and yet the very invokers of the directives own golf courses and have made decisions that their interpretation of their own directive is that it permits golf. That is extraordinarily powerful evidence. You will not get a letter signed in blood by Gavin Newsom that what you're doing is okay. And even if you did, that would not inoculate you. It would just be another piece of evidence. So in terms of that, so I hope that answers your question. And that's, I think that's the best we can do. And with that, and by the way, to that question, no matter the circumstance, that is always the best you can do. So.
And Holly, just to add to what Craig said, I just got an email just now from the city, from the public works director, saying that golf courses are still open with safety precautions. So, and that's put basically in writing, saying that Oceanside golf courses are open. So I think that's enough for us to proceed with maintaining our operations going forward.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Tom, especially for, getting on that so quickly and getting that communication established. It's a massive relief. I can't even tell you. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks. That's really good. We've got a couple of other questions and bits of info. San Diego City courses are open, including Torrey Pines, of course. And had a question from Heidi, actually. What ideas and suggestions and guidelines are there for an individual business owner like myself as an independent contractor at a facility? What is the right plan to communicate with clients, protect financial security and income? I don't know if anybody can answer that, but would appreciate a response if anybody has a response.
Hey Heidi, Anthony here. I've been contacting Blake Jurgis and a few other independent contractors that we're working with, and it seems to me that most of the communication right now is just most people are still giving instruction. They're limiting their group numbers, and they're also communicating kind of their safety precautions, all of the stuff that they're doing to make sure that anyone who comes in for a lesson is staying safe and that all the precautions are taken. I know a lot of people are moving to online lessons where they're either FaceTiming or sending you video, and you're kind of doing a little bit of analysis virtually. So just a few thoughts there.
Thanks, Anthony. Tony Latendra, are you still on the line? I know you had another comment you'd like to make.
I am. I just wanted to piggyback on the liability part because we had some good information and then it kind of went in a little bit different direction. I had inquired with President Whaley if she would ask our general counsel Henry Smokler the question about liability, and the conversation that her and I had was basically, and forgive me, I'm going to read a little bit from the email trail, but I don't know much of the details, and I really don't know how much I can say about it. But rumor is there's a club in Orange County that has been brought suit with somebody saying they contracted the coronavirus at their facility. I don't know how much validity there is to that, but it got me thinking about it. Is okay, well, where do we go? What kind of liability stands here? So I asked Susie to reach out to Henry Smokler, our general counsel for the PGA, and see what he had to say. Susie's initial reaction was, and I'll say it from her email, says, in her belief, the burden of proof must fall on the person accusing the facility of wrongdoing, and she was verifying that with Henry. And from a service level standpoint, it makes sense. The burden of proof would be on the person to prove that they actually contracted the virus based on a touch point at the club, not a touch point getting into their car to go to the club, not leaving the house because somebody else was exposed, et cetera, that burden of proof. I'm going to read you Henry's response so you guys have it in the back pocket. It's very vague, as you can imagine it would be, but I'm going to say this. It says, Tony and Susie, I obviously don't know any of the details of that case, but generally speaking, clubs and any business establishment could potentially have liability for failing to use reasonable precautions to protect staff and guests from coronavirus infection. What consists of reasonable precautions is certainly a moving target, but compliance with local health authorities, the CDC, and other relevant government authorities is paramount. So that is right from our legal counsel, Henry Smokler for the PGA of America.
Was there any conversation, or does anybody know about whether, I would assume that our liability insurance that we have as a PGA member will help in any case? Anybody comment on that, Tony, that you're aware of?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. No, nothing about that I'm aware of, but as everybody on the call, if you're not aware, everyone does as a PGA member have through the PGA of America a liability insurance coverage. I believe it's up to $1 million. Is that correct,
yeah,
Tom?
That's correct.
Yeah, so every PGA member has that. I'm sure that's part of the dialogue, and I'm sure that's kind of where the conversation of where the burden of proof lies.
Somebody was going to make a comment? Okay. We're winding down here. It's nearly 10:30. If anybody has any comments at all, would appreciate, would appreciate now. We are doing this call as a reminder, again, Monday at 9:30. And our plan is to do these calls as frequently as necessary, and probably at least once a week. That will convene these calls while we go through this, and hopefully open to everyone. So, any more questions? I know there's some questions.
Can I chime in? There's a whole bunch of comments coming my way, and I'll just answer them all at once. Let me find out. I'm sharing that with you because I want to share information, and I hope I'm not doing it out of school. Before I actually physically send it to everyone, I'll make sure that I can do so from Henry, and maybe we'll send something out from the section letting people know just kind of in general what that is. So I shared that in here, and I hope I wasn't out of school in doing so.
No, I think that's fine. And also like to remind everyone that on pga.org, there's a lot of information. There's kind of a chat room. You can email back and forth regarding COVID-19 and best practices. So I would encourage you to use pga.org as well as scpga.com, and we'll find out from our legal counsel how far we can go in publicizing the information, and we'll do our best there. So if there's not any more questions, we will follow up and on some of the questions that were rendered. Appreciate Craig and Tony. Kevin Heaney was also on the line, as well as Kevin Fitzgerald. And we appreciate your time, and hopefully you'll be able to participate on Monday with any updates that we might have. But again, Monday at 9:30, once again for this member chat, and we will have more information for you. And remember, if you have anything else that you'd like to contribute or ask, please send them through our way, whether it's Nikki or Jeff or myself. Our emails as well as our direct lines are on scpga.com. I gave you my cell number earlier, which is 858-775-7421. And please text me if you wish. So thank you very, very much. And we'll be talking with you on Monday. Thanks, everybody.
Tom, thank you very much for putting this together for everybody, and certainly appreciate everybody's participation on the call. I've seen your responses. You may have seen me typing there just a minute ago. I have already sent the email to Henry to see if I can share that information in some form or word for word. So thanks for your questions there. And again, Tom, Nikki, everybody at the office, thank you so much for your diligence and your timeliness and all the response and communication with all of us, because it's very helpful. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Tony. Thanks, everybody.